Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to BookTrek 2021. This is a 5-month mission I'm embarked on with a bunch of other booktubers where we're reading Star Trek fiction. For the rest of the year, we're doing the first 5 major iterations of the show. So the original series, and that lumps in the animated series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and then this month, Voyager. And in just a little while, in just a week, we will move on from Voyager to Star Trek Enterprise, and that will finish out the year. And I really like Voyager as a TV show. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really, really good, except for a couple of really bad episodes, including one episode that it was, even when I was watching it with commercial breaks on a TV, which I haven't had in years, I was thinking, this is not only really bad for Voyager, this is really bad for TV, just in general. And that episode, the less said about it, the better. Captain Janeway and Tom Paris de-evolve into slugs. The better. It's pretty bad. But most of the time, I really enjoyed myself with the show. And one of the things that I've been mentioning about it that I really liked was that the characters, they're all trapped on board a starship. They weren't expecting to be together for so long. They weren't expecting all to have all the additions that they have. Voyager, despite the fact that it's trapped 80,000 light years on the other side of the galaxy from the Federation, manages to add members to its cast quite a bit and loses a few. And I like the fact that right from the beginning, long relationships between those characters were alluded to, but not explicitly delved into. And also animosities between those characters were also alluded to, but not specifically ever delved into. Is there a hint, for instance, that in his own Starfleet past, First Officer Chakotay knew Tom Paris in his Starfleet past? Is it possible that B'Elanna Torres knew both of them at Starfleet? Is it possible that Commander Tuvok knew them both? And how long has Tuvok known the captain? And when did he become her best friend? And so on and so forth. I really like those. Those are present in every, I would argue, every episodic drama of any kind, but certainly every Star Trek show. You're wondering, how do these characters know each other? What are they like when, so to speak, the camera is not on them? Which has always led me to like a particular kind of story. You'll never get it in a TV show, because TV shows are after ratings, which means you need to use your special effects budget or you'll lose it. It means you need to keep wowing your audience. So you can't always or often or almost ever give them anything that is quiet. And the exploration of those little moments would be quiet. You occasionally do get them alluded to here and there, in the shows. Like, for instance, in Voyager, there's a fan favorite scene, just a little moment. The crew believes that Catherine Janeway is dead, and they are giving their personal tributes to her at a memorial service. And the young newbie on the team, Harry Kim, describes a moment on an away mission when they were gathering food supplies and they were gorging on an edible kind of local berry, and they had the berry mess all over their mouths. And he has a quiet little moment with Captain Janeway during that away mission. You could never really, I would think, film that moment. You could never justify to the show's executive producer why it was one of the things you were filming for an hour-long show that cost $120,000 per episode. But so you have to allude to it. But one of my favorite kinds of stories is when we get those moments. There was a long-running series of short story anthologies for Star Trek called Brave New Worlds that had a lot of those moments in it, where the pressure is off the short story writer, so to speak. They don't have to write about the Dominion War. Instead, they can write about a little moment in the Dominion War without that freight of narrative weight over their heads. I've always enjoyed that. I like it a lot. And I found a Voyager book last night that I didn't know existed. I must have completely missed it, because it's exactly that. It's this. Now, I've tried this many times in many different filming locations, and there is no way that the iPad simply doesn't wash out to a totally unhelpful white screen unless I heavily angle it. So you're just going to have to take my word for it. I can get a little bit of the color if I angle it just a little. It's called Star Trek Voyager Distant Shores. But I have tried this many times, and there's simply no way to do. Look at that. Totally lost. Just gone completely. There's simply no way to do it. I have to angle it like that to get you to see it. Unfortunately. But it's because it's a pretty cover, and not all Voyager covers are. But it's an anthology called Star Trek Voyager, Distant Shores, and it is entirely composed of stories about those little moments. There's almost nothing in here. There are a dozen stories in here. There's almost nothing in here that I would call heavily plotted. Instead, these are meant to fill in little continuity holes and maybe answer some of those questions. Of course, it won't be canonical answers, but maybe answer some of those questions. Why does so-and-so seem to hate so-and-so? What did so-and-so do right after the moment that we see in episode X, Y, or Z? Because that strikes the writer as really interesting. I would like to know what happened in that little moment. Well, in this anthology, you get those little moments. And I loved it. Just loved it. I mean, with any story anthology, there are going to be weak spots. There are a couple of weak stories in here. In fact, I think the one that the collection starts off with is one of the weakest ones in there, which is a failure on the part of the editing team here. I've put together some anthologies myself, and you don't want to lead off with a weak story, no matter how strong the rest of the stories are. It's just simple browser's mechanics. But most of them, I'd say a much higher percentage of them than usual in an anthology, are very good. So my Voyager reading streak for November continues, and is really, really good. It's really, really pleasing. So that's my BookTrek for today. I'm going to continue with Voyager for, I don't remember the date, but it's, I think, the 23rd. So we have another week of Voyager, and there are plenty of Voyager novels to get to, including stuff like this one that I hadn't read. I'm also tempted to go to fanfiction.net and see what I can find under the heading of Star Trek Voyager fiction. Fanfiction.net is a sprawling website of just fanfiction, which a lot of purists will tell you is this. And any Star Trek fiction, that all of it is fan fiction, because the only thing that's canon is what's on the screen. Therefore, you are writing extra-canonical stories about these characters and concepts that are owned by somebody else. I think if you're writing it for an arm of Paramount, it's probably less fan fiction than what you'd find on fanfiction.net. But the benefit of fanfiction.net, I mean, the drawback is that it's really non-canonical, and also it's, of course, homegrown, so there aren't any editors involved. Although, from what I hear from friends of mine who write tie-in fiction and whatnot, low-tier fiction for the major publishing houses, they don't get edited either. But there's no editing at all at someplace like fanfiction.net. But on the other hand, things can happen. It's like the old Wild West of fanzine fiction. Things can happen to characters on fanfiction.net without any need to check with the lawyers at Paramount, and that can be very, very interesting. I might do that. I'm also tempted to give a little channel review of the first 3 episodes of Star Trek Prodigy, which it's an animated show. It's pretty clearly aimed at children, but it is Star Trek, and the more I watch of it, the more Star Trek I think it is. And I mean, it's not done like Star Trek's ever been done, but we're going to have to get used to that. Star Trek can't be done the same way every time. It has aged out of the generation that loved it first, and a whole new generation will have whole new demands on it. But the reason why I'm thinking about doing a review of it for this month of BookTrek is because it's more saturated with Voyager than it is with any other previous incarnation of Star Trek. And I don't just mean because the ship involved has an interactive hologram of Catherine Janeway that's voiced by Kate Mulgrew. It's not just that. It's also the ship itself, we learn. There's a fantastically designed starship in this show. You see it in the first episode. It comes to life in the first episode, a wonderful, wonderful moment. And then just you get to know it more and more with each succeeding episode. And you get to learn more about not only what it is and what it can do, but why it was built. And all of that revolves around Voyager. Hence Captain Janeway's presence as a hologram on the ship. I don't know, maybe a review of that. I don't tend to do TV reviews here or cable reviews, but like I said, there's plenty to choose from. So I will roam around in the world of Voyager, and I will be back to you probably this weekend. Tomorrow is the holiday of Thanksgiving here in the United States. It is a major holiday. There's lots and lots of road travel. I'm hoping that you all stay safe. If you're traveling, for instance, today, there'll be 50 million people, literally 50 million people traveling today everywhere, choking the airports, choking the roads, and in such a hurry to get wherever it is they're going that they're exercising a lot less caution than they usually do. Fortunately, this quarter of the country, the Northeast, where I am, is spared what could have been a nightmare scenario. Just a nightmare. I mean, the massive transportation glut at Thanksgiving, immediately prior to Thanksgiving, when people are going homes, they're going to homes, or in the case of me and Frida, to somebody else's home. That's a nightmare scenario anyway. But all the weather forecasts now seem to say that Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, is going to be a messy, messy day of cold rain and sleet and maybe even a little snow. And all I can think is, what if that had happened today? Just 2 days, just 20 hours difference could have made the difference in literal life and death. If that had happened, if that storm had broken at 10 this morning, well, you know that nobody's going to change their travel plans because of the weather. Not for Thanksgiving, no way. So who knows? Who knows what the roads would have been like between here and Washington, D.C., between here and New York. Ugh. So it's possible. It's possible that I will have no BookTrek videos until the weekend. But I will have more Voyager to talk about before the month ends. So I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.